You know, the coolest innovations often come from the most unexpected places. Like when you take the expertise from one super specialized field and just apply it to a totally different problem. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty amazing case study of exactly that. So, let's just jump right in with a question that, I admit, sounds a little weird. How can rocket science, the stuff that sends humans to space, have anything to do with powering a fish farm? I mean, it seems like two completely different worlds, right? Well, take a look at this. This is your answer. These are wind-powered aerators. They're a super clean, really efficient way to keep water full of oxygen for the fish. And the technology that makes them work so well? Yep, it comes straight from the world of aerospace engineering. And to really get how that incredible leap was made, we've got to go back to the very beginning. We need to talk about the company's founder and his pretty unique vision. So meet Dr. Shih Chen. And let me tell you, his background is just wow. We're talking a master's from Stanford, a PhD from Purdue in aeronautics and astronautics, and he was a rocket engine senior specialist for a major NASA contractor. This is a guy who has spent his entire career deep in the world of high-level fluid dynamics and precision engineering. So how on earth does a rocket scientist end up building a green energy company? Well, here's the secret. He never stopped thinking like one. He built his company like an aerospace firm with this absolutely relentless focus on research and development. And what's the result of that focus? Well, how about this number? Over 180 patents. That's not just a few ideas. That is a massive portfolio of innovation, covering everything from wind and water tech to clever energy-saving devices.
And how do they pull off that level of innovation?
This is how.
A full 60% of their entire staff works in R&D. And we're not talking about interns here. The majority of these folks hold master's degrees and PhDs. They're basically a think tank that also happens to build things. And this right here gives you a perfect snapshot of their whole process. On the left, you've got their in-house wind tunnel. That's a tool straight out of the aerospace playbook, right? That's for testing and simulating everything. Then on the right, you see the result, a streamlined assembly line, putting those incredibly fine-tuned designs into production. And look, don't just take my word for it, this is straight from the source. The company itself says that its core design and simulation methods are a direct evolution of aerospace tech. It's not just an inspiration for them, it is literally baked into their DNA. Okay, so we've seen the aerospace mindset. Now let's check out how that translates into some seriously clever products. We'll start with how they tackle the fundamental forces of wind and water. You know, huge wind farms are amazing, but you've got these massive gaps between the giant turbines, and a ton of wind energy just blows right through, totally unused. So Jetpro asked a really simple but brilliant question. What if we could actually capture all that wasted energy? And their solution is something they call the wind wall. This chart shows you just how big a deal it is. By putting arrays of their smaller modular turbines in those gaps, they can recover megawatts of extra power from the exact same piece of land. And the best part, it doesn't interfere with the big turbines at all. And this is what it actually looks like. Pretty cool, right? This modular design is a really key part of their philosophy. It's way easier to transport, install, and maintain than those giant single structures, which means the overall cost comes way down, especially for projects out at sea. All right, now for the water. Their ocean wave energy converter is just genius because of how simple it is. Instead of some complex mess of gears, it uses the natural up and down of the waves to push air back and forth through this U-shaped column of water. That creates pressure changes that spin a turbine. It's like the ocean is literally breathing to create electricity. So why is this so important? Well, for thousands of islands, say, in Indonesia or the Philippines, that have to rely on expensive, dirty diesel fuel for power, this is a total game changer. It gives them a real path to energy independence. Same goes for remote communities, military bases, even desalination plants. So, beyond these big renewable projects, that same engineering mindset is being used to solve more immediate, really practical problems, like getting power where it's needed most and just making the systems we already have way more efficient. I mean, just think about the places where power is absolutely critical, but also the hardest to get. A disaster zone after a storm, a refugee camp, a military base way out in the middle of nowhere. In these situations, a reliable off-grid power source isn't a luxury, it's a literal lifeline. And here is their brilliant solution. On the left, you see it's just a compact, mobile unit you can tow anywhere. But once it gets where it needs to go, look at the right, it deploys and transforms into a full-on hybrid power station with solar panels, a wind turbine, and a diesel generator for backup. It's basically a self-contained power grid in a box. And remember, it's not always about generating new energy. Sometimes it's about saving what we're already using. Now, this might just look like a boring patent diagram, but it's tackling a massive global problem, all the fuel that millions of transport trucks burn every single day. This little device is designed to manage airflow and slash aerodynamic drag.
And the impact? It's huge. A 10% reduction in fuel consumption. Now you might think, 10%, so what? But when you realize there are millions of these trucks on the roads in the US, Europe, and China, a 10% savings adds up to an unbelievable amount of fuel, money, and emissions saved. It's staggering. So when you start to pull all these different threads together, the fish farms, the wind walls, the mobile power, you start to see this clear blueprint for innovation taking shape, one with a truly global reach.
And this isn't just some small local operation either. Their ideas and their intellectual property are registered all over the world. We're talking the USA, Germany, Japan, China, Australia, India. It's a clear sign that they have a global strategy to get this technology out there.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Whether you're designing a rocket engine to handle superheated gas at incredible speeds, or a river turbine to handle the slow, powerful flow of water, the core physics, those fundamental principles of fluid dynamics, are exactly the same. The success story here is a masterclass in seeing that connection and transferring that knowledge.
And this really just leaves us with one final thought. If rocket science can help power a fish farm and make trucks use less fuel, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where will the next big energy breakthrough come from? What other high-tech field out there holds the key to solving our next great challenge?